Imagine Leilani, radiant in her wedding gown, only for her maid of honor to fire her during the toast at their dream reception. But when betrayal explodes in front of 200 guests, the justice she unleashes will shock you to your core. Thanks, Eliza, for letting me share this. It's been a journey of pain turned power, and I'm grateful to finally tell how I flipped the script on that deceptive day. My name is Leilani, and at 27, I thought I had everything figured out. Born and raised in California, I embraced my Pacific Islander heritage while living the American dream my parents had sacrificed everything for when they immigrated from Samoa. Standing in my downtown apartment that Saturday morning, 3 months before my wedding, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror. My long black hair cascaded in waves past my shoulders, the subtle caramel highlights catching the morning light. I tucked a fresh hibiscus flower behind my ear, a small tribute to my grandmother's memory and our family's Pacific Islander heritage. My dark brown eyes sparkled with excitement as I admired the engagement ring Mark had given me 6 months earlier. I was living exactly the life my parents had dreamed of for me. I had a thriving career in digital marketing at Pinnacle Communications, working directly under Caroline Hartwell, the company's brilliant and demanding creative director. Caroline wasn't just my boss. Over the past 2 years, she'd become my mentor, my friend, and now my maid of honor. Though looking back, there had been moments that should have warned me. Like when she'd made that cutting comment about my ethnic accessories during a client meeting, then laughed it off as a joke when she saw my face. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," Caroline had said when I'd nervously asked her to stand beside me at the altar. "I'm honored you'd choose me, Leilani. We're going to make this wedding absolutely perfect." Mark Sullivan was everything I'd dreamed of in a partner. Tall, charming, with that easy smile that had first caught my attention at a coffee shop near my office. He was an independent consultant, smart and ambitious, working on landing a major contract with a tech startup. When he proposed on the beach at sunset, with my parents watching from a distance, I felt like my life was finally coming together in the most beautiful way. My family had pooled their resources for this wedding, making sacrifices that still brought tears to my eyes. My father had sold his prized fishing boat, a family heirloom passed down from my grandfather, to cover the venue costs. The boat had been his pride and joy, but he'd signed the papers without hesitation. "My daughter's happiness is worth more than any boat," he'd said. My mother cleaned houses on weekends, her hands raw from scrubbing other people's floors to pay for my flowers. My younger brother had given up his spring break trip and worked double shifts at a restaurant to contribute to my dream day. The Rosewood Estate, with its sprawling gardens and elegant ballroom, cost $50,000, more money than my family had ever spent on anything. $10,000 alone went to the flowers, each arrangement carefully chosen to honor both my Samoan heritage and Mark's American traditions. Caroline had insisted on helping with everything. "I have connections," she'd said, waving away my protests. "Let me make some calls. This is what friends do for each other." She'd negotiated with vendors, suggested menu changes, and even helped Mark find a temporary office space where he could work on his big presentation without distractions. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, as I would soon discover. The changes started subtly, like hairline fractures in a beautiful vase. Caroline, who had always been demanding but fair at work, began treating me differently. She'd make snide comments about my distraction levels during meetings, despite my work quality remaining consistently high. The moment that should have been my first real warning came during a client presentation when she interrupted me mid-sentence to say, "I'm sorry, Leilani seems to have wedding brain today. Let me take over." The humiliation burned, but I told myself she was just stressed. When I requested my vacation days for the honeymoon, she sighed dramatically. "I suppose we'll have to manage without you somehow," she'd said, loud enough for the entire office to hear. "Though I do hope this wedding planning isn't affecting your commitment to your career, Leilani." I brushed it off. Caroline was under pressure from upper management, and I understood that stress could make anyone irritable. Besides, she was still helping plan my wedding, still my maid of honor, still the person I trusted most outside my family. Mark's behavior was harder to ignore. He'd always been busy, but now he seemed to disappear for hours at a time. His new office was a small suite in a business complex across town, where he claimed he could focus better on his presentation. He'd leave early in the morning and return late at night, often smelling faintly of an expensive perfume I didn't recognize. "You're just stressed about the wedding," he'd say whenever I brought up his absence. "Caroline's been helping me practice my presentation. You know how thorough she is. She wants everything to be perfect for us." The mention of Caroline always ended these conversations. How could I be suspicious when my maid of honor was helping my fiancé succeed? It made sense. It was thoughtful. It was exactly what a good friend would do. But late at night, when Mark was asleep beside me, I'd lie awake with a gnawing feeling in my stomach. The perfume smell was familiar, sharp, expensive, with notes of jasmine and sandalwood. I'd smelled it every day for 2 years in Caroline's office. 2 weeks before the wedding, during our final dress fitting, Caroline made an offhand comment that stopped me cold. "You know, Leilani, you're so lucky to have found someone like Mark. He's so dedicated to his work. I really admire that in a man." She adjusted my veil with careful precision. "Some women might feel neglected, but you're mature enough to understand that success requires sacrifice." The way she said it, with that slight smile playing at her lips, made my skin crawl. But when I looked at her in the mirror, her expression was perfectly innocent. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The perfume, the late nights, Caroline's strange comments, it all swirled together into a toxic cocktail of doubt that I couldn't ignore any longer. I needed proof, one way or another, to either confirm my fears or put them to rest. I bought a small surveillance camera online, disguised as a phone charger. It was motion-activated and connected to a cloud service that would send alerts to my phone. My hands shook as I set it up, feeling like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. 3 days after Caroline's unsettling comment about Mark's dedication, I knew I had to act. The next morning, I kissed Mark goodbye as he left for his office. "I'll bring you lunch later," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "I want to see this mysterious workspace of yours." "That's sweet, but you don't need to do that," he replied, avoiding my eyes. "I'll probably be in meetings most of the day." "I insist. Besides, I noticed you mentioned needing a better phone charger. I have one of those universal ones that might work better." He couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious, so an hour later, I found myself in his sterile temporary office. When the coordinator stepped out to take a call, I quickly placed my phone charger in a discreet corner where it would have a clear view of the room. Mark was genuinely in a meeting, so I left quickly, my heart pounding with guilt and anticipation. The first few days, nothing happened. I began to feel foolish, paranoid, like I was sabotaging my own happiness with unfounded suspicions. Maybe I was just wedding stressed. Maybe I was looking for problems where none existed. Then, on a Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a motion alert at 7:15 p.m. Mark had texted me an hour earlier saying he'd be working late again. With trembling fingers, I logged into the camera's app. The video that began playing on my phone screen destroyed my world in 30 seconds. Caroline entered the frame first, wearing the burgundy dress I'd complimented her on that morning. She was carrying 2 glasses of wine and laughing at something off camera. Then Mark appeared, and the way he looked at her, with hunger, with familiarity, with the kind of intimacy I thought was reserved for me, made my stomach lurch. I watched them kiss. I watched Caroline set down the wine glasses and begin unbuttoning Mark's shirt. I watched my maid of honor and my fiancé move together with the practiced ease of people who had done this many times before. When Caroline dropped to her knees, I stopped the video. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, staring at my phone screen, feeling like my entire identity was crumbling around me. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I actually vomited in the parking lot, my body rejecting the reality my mind was trying to process. The woman I trusted most, and the man I was supposed to marry in 10 days, had been betraying me for who knows how long. Every late night, every work meeting, every time Caroline had touched my arm and called me sweet, naive Leilani, it had all been a lie. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place. Not sadness, not despair, but a cold, crystalline anger that seemed to sharpen my thinking rather than cloud it. They thought I was naive. They thought I was too trusting, too stupid to figure out their game. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't confront them immediately like every instinct told me to do. Instead, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and began to plan. My family had invested their life savings in this wedding. $50,000 that represented years of sacrifice, my father's beloved fishing boat, my mother's weekends spent scrubbing floors, my brother's forfeited spring break. 200 people had made arrangements to celebrate with us. The Rosewood estate was booked, the flowers were ordered, the band was hired. Caroline and Mark thought they could humiliate me, use me, and discard me without consequences. They were about to discover that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of their lives. Over the next week, I became the perfect bride-to-be. I smiled at the rehearsal dinner, complimented Caroline's speech about friendship and loyalty, and kissed Mark with lips that tasted like ash but looked convincing enough to fool everyone around us. I downloaded the video file to my phone and made sure I had backup copies stored safely in multiple locations. I also did my research. The Rosewood Estate's ballroom had a state-of-the-art AV system with wireless connectivity. During our final walkthrough, while the coordinator was distracted by a catering question, I discreetly tested the AirPlay function under the guise of checking our slideshow setup. I memorized the Wi-Fi password and confirmed the connection worked flawlessly. The giant screen behind the head table, originally planned to display a slideshow of Mark and me throughout our relationship, would serve a different purpose entirely. Caroline continued her performance as the devoted maid of honor, fussing over last-minute details and making subtle digs about my wedding stress affecting my work performance. "I do hope you can refocus after the honeymoon," she'd said with false concern. "The team really needs someone reliable." Mark grew increasingly nervous as the wedding approached, which I initially attributed to normal groom jitters. Now I realized he was probably torn between guilt and anticipation of whatever endgame he and Caroline had planned. The night before the wedding, as I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by my wedding dress and the flowers my mother had lovingly arranged, I felt a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring justice. Not just for me, but for my family who had sacrificed so much, for the guests who were coming to celebrate love and commitment, and for every other person who had ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. I tucked the hibiscus flower behind my ear one more time, looking at myself in the mirror. I had dreamed of this day since I was a girl, imagining myself in my grandmother's tradition with flowers in my hair, but now that dream was forever tainted by their betrayal. By tomorrow night, I would be a different person entirely, one who had learned to fight back. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with that golden California sunshine that makes everything look like a movie set. I woke up in my parents' house, surrounded by the sounds of my family, preparing for what they believed would be the happiest day of their daughter's life. My mother helped me into my dress, a flowing creation of silk and lace that had taken months to save for. As she fastened the tiny buttons up the back, her hands trembled slightly with emotion. "You look just like your grandmother on her wedding day," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." The guilt nearly broke me then. My family's joy was so pure, so genuine, and I was about to shatter the illusion they'd held about this perfect day. But I reminded myself that the shattering wasn't my fault, it was Caroline's and Mark's. I was just the one who would make sure the truth finally came to light. Caroline arrived at the bridal suite looking stunning in her emerald green maid of honor dress, carrying a bouquet of white orchids and wearing that same innocent smile that had fooled me for so long. She fussed over my hair, adjusting the hibiscus flower and spraying everything with enough hairspray to survive a hurricane. "You look absolutely radiant," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Mark is such a lucky man." The irony was so thick I could taste it, but I just smiled back. "I'm the lucky one. I have such wonderful people in my life." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of practiced motions and hollow words. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, seeing Mark waiting at the altar in his black tuxedo, looking nervous but handsome. As we approached the altar where my grandmother's hibiscus lei was draped in honor of our family traditions, I felt the crushing weight of how this sacred moment had been poisoned. Our eyes met, and for just a moment I saw a flicker of something, guilt, fear, regret, cross his face. I said my vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish him for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death do us part. The words felt like shards of glass in my throat, each promise a mockery of what marriage was supposed to represent. Mark's vows were equally traditional, equally meaningless. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife and Mark kissed me, I tasted betrayal on his lips. The photographs were torture. Smile after smile, pose after pose, with Caroline standing beside me in every shot, her hand on my shoulder like a supportive friend. In one particularly cruel moment, the photographer asked for a shot of the three most important people in the bride's life, me, Mark, and Caroline, all standing together with the sunset behind us. "This one's going to be beautiful," the photographer said. "You can see the love and friendship in this shot." If only he knew. As we moved to the reception, I felt the weight of my phone in the hidden pocket of my dress. The video was queued up, ready to play. The AirPlay password was memorized. Everything was in place for the moment of truth. The Rosewood Estates ballroom looked like something from a fairy tale. Soft lighting cast everything in a warm, golden glow, and the massive screen behind the head table displayed a slideshow of Mark and me, hiking in the mountains, laughing at a restaurant, kissing on the beach where he proposed. Each image was a reminder of how thoroughly I'd been deceived, every happy memory now contaminated by the knowledge of his betrayal. 200 guests filled the elegant space, my family and friends mixed with Mark's colleagues and Caroline's social circle. Out of those 200, 150 were my family and friends, people who had traveled from across the country, taken time off work, and spent money they didn't have to celebrate what they thought was my happiness. My parents sat at the family table, beaming with pride. My brother had flown in from college, and my aunts and cousins had driven up from Los Angeles. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, ready to celebrate love and new beginnings. The dinner service went smoothly, with conversations flowing and laughter echoing through the ballroom. I played my part perfectly, the glowing bride accepting congratulations and well wishes with gracious smiles. Mark seemed to relax as the evening progressed, probably thinking he'd successfully navigated the most dangerous part of his deception. Caroline worked the room like the social butterfly she was, charming guests and accepting compliments on her speech-writing skills. Several people mentioned how honored I must feel to have such a devoted friend as my maid of honor. "She's been like a sister to Leilani," I heard her tell my aunt. "I just want everything to be perfect for her special day." As the dinner plates were cleared and the champagne was poured for toasts, I felt my pulse quicken. The moment was approaching. I touched my phone through the fabric of my dress, making sure it was still there, still ready. Caroline stood first, tapping her champagne flute with a silver spoon to get everyone's attention. The conversations died down, and all eyes turned to her as she stepped toward the microphone at the head table. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "For those who don't know me, I'm Caroline Hartwell, Leilani's maid of honor and her boss at Pinnacle Communications." A ripple of appreciative laughter went through the crowd. Someone called out, "Best boss ever," which got another laugh. Caroline smiled, raising her champagne flute. "I'd like to propose a toast to the beautiful bride who has shown such dedication over the past few months." Something in her tone made my spine stiffen. This wasn't the speech we'd rehearsed. This wasn't the touching tribute to friendship she'd shown me earlier. "Leilani has been so focused on this wedding," Caroline continued, her smile taking on a sharp edge that only I seemed to notice. "So very focused that she's had to take a significant amount of time off from work to make sure every detail was perfect." A few people chuckled nervously. My mother looked confused, glancing between Caroline and me with growing concern. Caroline's voice grew louder, more confident. So much time off, in fact, that it's affected her performance and reliability as an employee. The room went very quiet. Mark was staring at his plate, his face pale. I realized with crystal clarity that this was planned. This was their endgame, to humiliate me publicly, to strip away my job and my dignity in front of everyone I loved. Caroline raised her champagne flute higher, her smile now openly cruel. "So I want to wish her the very best in her future endeavors. Because as of this moment, effective immediately, she is fired for excessive absenteeism and unprofessional conduct." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 people sat frozen in shock, champagne flutes halfway to their lips, unable to process what they'd just heard. My father started to rise from his chair, his face dark with anger. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. But I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or protest or beg. Instead, I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate and calm. I took a sip of water, placed the glass down with a soft click that seemed to echo through the silent ballroom, and reached for my phone. Caroline was still standing there with her champagne flute raised, probably expecting me to break down, to run from the room in tears, to give her the complete victory she'd orchestrated. Mark was slouched in his chair like a man waiting for execution. Neither of them was prepared for what happened next. I connected my phone to the ballroom's Wi-Fi, entered the AirPlay password, and selected the giant screen behind us. The slideshow of happy memories vanished, replaced by a loading screen that seemed to take an eternity. Then the video began to play. The footage was even more damning on the giant screen than it had been on my phone. Crystal clear, perfectly framed, undeniably real. There was Caroline, my maid of honor, entering Mark's office with wine glasses and that predatory smile. There was my husband, my brand new husband, pulling her into his arms with the familiarity of long practice. I picked up the microphone Caroline had abandoned, my voice cutting through the stunned silence with perfect clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said calmly, "since we're sharing professional updates tonight, I thought you might be interested in seeing exactly what kind of work my maid of honor has been helping my husband with." The audio wasn't on. I'd muted it to spare my family the worst details, but none was needed. The visual evidence was overwhelming, devastating, absolutely conclusive. As the video continued, I provided my own commentary. "This is the moment she entered his office, pretending to help with his presentation, but really helping herself," I said, my voice steady as Caroline's face went white with horror. "Notice how comfortable they are with each other. This clearly isn't their first time." When Caroline dropped to her knees and Mark's head fell back in pleasure, a woman in the back of the ballroom let out a sharp cry of shock. "And here we see the kind of dedication Caroline really admires in a man," I continued, as Mark looked up at the screen and made a sound like he was being strangled. The silence stretched for 3 eternal seconds as 200 people processed what they were seeing. Then chaos erupted. "Oh my God," someone screamed. Is that really?" another voice stammered. My uncle shot to his feet, pointing at the screen with a face purple with rage. "You son of a bitch," he roared at Mark. Caroline's champagne flute slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound like a gunshot in the acoustics of the ballroom. Her face had gone completely white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Mark started to push back from the table, but my brother was already moving toward him with murder in his eyes. "As you can see," I continued, and somehow my calm tone made everyone freeze, "there have been some developments in my marriage that require immediate attention." The video was still playing behind me, a silent testament to months of deception and betrayal. I could feel its presence like a fire at my back, but I didn't turn to look. Caroline finally found her voice. "Leilani, I can explain." "No," I said, and the single word carried such authority that she actually stepped backward. "No explanations, no excuses, no lies." I turned to address the room, my family, my friends, all the people who had come to celebrate what they thought was the beginning of my happily ever after. My maid of honor just fired me from my job during her wedding toast. She thought she could humiliate me, embarrass me in front of all of you, and there would be no consequences. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. She was wrong. Behind me, the video had moved to an even more explicit scene. Someone's grandmother was being escorted out by concerned relatives, but most of the crowd remained transfixed by the unfolding drama. "It turns out," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, "that I'm the one with new opportunities tonight. The opportunity to not be married to a cheating, lying coward. The opportunity to not work for a morally bankrupt snake who thinks friendship is a game and loyalty is a weakness." I looked directly at Caroline and Mark, who were both frozen in their chairs like deer in headlights. The opportunity to show everyone exactly who you really are. The video finally ended, the screen going black. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong. "This wedding is over," I announced. "But this party is just beginning. My family paid for this beautiful celebration, and we will not let your betrayal ruin it. The bar is open, the band is ready, and we're going to celebrate the most important thing of all, the truth." I turned back to Caroline and Mark one final time. "As for you two, I believe you know where the exit is. Security will escort you out if you're having trouble finding it." I didn't watch them leave. I simply placed the microphone down, walked over to my father, and took his outstretched hand. His eyes were blazing with fierce pride, and when he wrapped his arms around me, I finally felt safe enough to let the first tear fall. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief, of liberation, of justice finally served. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Caroline and Mark scrambled from the ballroom like the cowards they were, leaving behind a crowd of stunned but increasingly supportive guests. My family rallied around me with the fierce protectiveness of people who had been deeply wronged, and my friends, my real friends, made it clear that they stood with me completely. The band, after a moment of confused consultation, struck up an upbeat song that seemed to break the spell of shock hanging over the room. People began to move again, to talk, to process what they'd witnessed. The consensus was unanimous. I had handled the situation with more grace and strength than anyone could have expected. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," my college roommate said, hugging me tightly. "I can't believe you kept it together like that." My mother, tears streaming down her face, held my hands as I finally removed my wedding ring and placed it on the head table, next to the shattered remains of Caroline's champagne flute. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Your grandmother always said you had steel in your spine, and tonight you proved it." The party that followed was unlike anything I could have imagined. What started as a wedding reception became a celebration of truth, justice, and the kind of family bonds that can't be broken by betrayal. People danced with more energy than they might have at a traditional wedding, as if the drama had released some kind of collective tension. My brother gave an impromptu toast that brought down the house. To my sister, who just proved that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even with style. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the balcony overlooking the estate's gardens, still wearing my wedding dress but feeling lighter than I had in months. The hibiscus flower had long since fallen from my hair, but I felt more beautiful than I ever had before. My father joined me, loosening his tie and shaking his head with amazement. "You know," he said, "when your mother and I saved up for this wedding, we thought we were paying for your happiness. Turns out we were paying for your freedom instead." I laughed, the sound carrying across the gardens like music. "Best investment you ever made." The legal consequences came quickly. The video evidence made my divorce proceedings straightforward. Mark couldn't contest anything when his infidelity was so thoroughly documented. Caroline's firing of me during the wedding toast, witnessed by 200 people and recorded by several guests on their phones, resulted in a wrongful termination lawsuit that my lawyer assured me was the easiest case he'd ever taken. But more than the legal victories, more than the financial settlements, was the knowledge that I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. I had been tested by fire and discovered that I was made of something unbreakable. 6 months later, I started my own digital marketing firm with the settlement money. My first client was a wedding planning company that wanted to hire the woman who handled that situation with such incredible grace. Word had spread through social media, someone had recorded the whole confrontation, and it had gone viral as an example of how to handle betrayal with dignity and strength. As I sat in my new office, looking out at the city skyline with my long black hair flowing over my shoulders and a fresh hibiscus flower tucked behind my ear, I realized that Caroline and Mark had actually given me a gift. They had shown me what I was truly capable of when pushed to my limits. They had tried to destroy me, and instead, they had set me free. The wedding that was supposed to be my beginning had indeed been exactly that, just not in the way anyone expected. It was the beginning of my real life, the life where I knew my own worth and would never again accept anything less than I deserved. And every time I told this story, which I did often, To inspire other women who had been betrayed and broken, I ended it the same way. They thought they were writing my ending. Instead, they gave me the most powerful beginning of my life. Trust your instincts, never let anyone dim your light, and remember, the truth will always find a way to shine through. I share this story not for sympathy, but as a reminder that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the very things that set us free. Sometimes the people who try to break us end up being the ones who show us just how unbreakable we really are. Leilani, your story is a testament to how trusting your instincts and confronting betrayal head-on can forge unbreakable strength from shattered dreams. It shows that even in our most vulnerable moments, truth and resilience can rewrite our futures. Thank you for inspiring us all. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.